If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to Project Me with Tiffany Carter, the podcast, where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash-making advice. Now let's get to it. Welcome to Project Me with Tiffany Carter, the podcast and posse. I'm your host, Tiffany, and today's interview is going to be so interesting for you to hear because you're going to get a peek behind the curtain of the news business, but also the business behind the news, and then what happens afterwards. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? I brought on one of my clients and someone who I would say is one of the best storytellers and interviewers there is, and has honed his craft for 32 years to the tune of Stuart Watson has 10 Emmys, 3 Peabody Awards, a Harvard Fellowship in journalism, and now he has started an incredible business that leverages all of these decades of experience, mistakes, flops, wins, awards, and all the things together. But I want you to really see how life weaves you somewhere. Like, we're being divinely guided all the time and we don't know it. Like, I never would have thought, because podcasts didn't exist, I think there was like ham radio when I was a newscaster. And that was for like really weird dudes in their like basement. Okay. I never thought when I was in journalism school, when I was a TV newscaster, I never thought, wow, all these skills I'm honing and I'm using and I'm being trained on, I'm going to use them in social media platforms someday to make millions of dollars in podcasting. I couldn't have planned that. And neither could have Stuart, and neither can you. All of your experience up to this date is not for naught. It's there for something, whether you went through a divorce, whether you had cancer, you being a stay-at-home mom, you were bullied in school, you were abused, whatever it was, you spent 40 years as an accountant. You were supposed to be there or you would have ended up somewhere different. That's part of your journey that builds upon, and we don't always get to know why, even though, damn it, I always want to know why. That's why I went to journalism school. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you so much. This is such a privilege. I'm so grateful to you.
So tell me I've never asked you this. What led you into journalism? Why did you want to do this insanely high pressure, fast paced career?
When you gave that lead in, all I could think of is there are times in my life where I thought, well, that was a failure. That was a loss. That was a waste. People feel that way about relationships, right? Like a divorce. Well, that was a waste of my youth. And then all of a sudden you get a little distance from it and you say, no, it was necessary. It was necessary to bring me to where I am now, to the relationships I have now or the business I have now. So I was in the wilderness. There have been a couple of periods in my life where I wandered in the wilderness for about 6 or 7 years each time. One when I was in my 20s, late teens and 20s. And then here recently, after the age of 55, wandering in the wilderness. And my temptation was first off, I dropped out of Vanderbilt University, a very good college. And then I flunked out and was asked the dreaded, do you really want to think about whether you really want to be here? That kind of talk from the dean. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to be there. And so I was waiting tables in a restaurant. It was part of the TGI Fridays chain.
No.
I was a terrible waiter, Tiffany.
I would have thought you would have been delightful.
I was horrible. I was disorganized. And also my story, I was drunk. So I was either drunk or hungover. Neither is good for remembering your order. And so I was always messing up orders. And people from the NBC station in Nashville, they would come down the hill and they would come to lunch. And so one day, because I would chat them up, I would get an A in chatting people up.
This is true. He can
expect me to get your order.
I asked him for this interview today. I was like, okay, can we do this time? And he's like, I'm meeting a friend I haven't seen for lunch. And I was like, yes, but it's going to be 3:00 your time. He's like, I'm like, that's a 3-hour lunch. And he's, yeah. That's Stuart right there.
So we'll cut our conversation short. I outlasted them. But at any rate, I asked the people at the TV station, can you work at the TV station? Can I do an internship? I'm an English major. I'm an English lit guy. And they said, you can work as much as you want for free, but you have to get academic credit for it. That's how they run their little scam. That's how they're able to not pay the interns.
This is exactly what I had to do in all my internships. Yep.
Yes. And so that's how I stumbled in. And if I'd have been next door to a newspaper, I would have been a newspaper reporter. It was a way to use the English language. And when I got into it, I was like, this is really fun because it's interesting. It's you talk to the governor and then you talk to the homeless guy on the same day. So you see people from Yale to jail every day. And you see the great expanse of humanity. You're not stuck you're not only in the country club. And you're also not only on the Bowery. You get to see everybody. You get to meet everybody. And sure enough, I did. I met just amazing expanse of people over the years, over the decades.
Did this station hire you from an intern to the news desk?
Oh, no, they would never do that.
I didn't think so. I was like, that's a big market, Nashville.
No,
I'm like, I'm like, maybe you got lucky.
Oh, but I started in the perfect. I'm this South Georgia. I proudly say this. You can't say this anymore, but I'm a proud Georgia cracker. That means something different.
Yeah.
And so my first job was in Jackson, Mississippi, the state capital of Mississippi. And oh my God, the stories just fall off the trees. It was a place, it was crazy.
I think in some of these small towns, you guys, God, that'd be another great episode we should do. You guys would be so entertained by some of the stories between Stuart and the stories I have. You go to these small towns, that's where the weird shit happens.
I covered the state house, the legislature, because it's a state capital. Hello, that's where the state lawmakers are. There was this very quiet guy that I never heard from. He wasn't a big bloviator. He wasn't a blowhard. And he sat in the back and he just did a good job as a state senator. And his name was John Grisham. I never even knew the guy, never even met him because he just did his job quietly. And then he quietly, after that, this was the early 80s, he started writing novels. And he said, I'll either make a living as a writer or I'll go to my hometown and become a judge. That's the kind of storytelling that came out of Mississippi. It was a place ready-made because the stories, there was a city council member in Jackson who faked his own death. And Grisham used it in one of his novels. It's where real life feeds. And all you have to do is hang out, listen, and then change the names and the novels. The screenplays just come to you.
Do you guys hear Stuart's passion, right through you? You can't not hear it. That's one of the common threads. And I want you guys to be looking at that in your own life. Because even if you're like miserable in a corporate job or you don't want to be staying at home or whatever, even if your business, it's boring to you now, there's something in there that got you into it in the first place. There's something that led you to it. there's at least one thing in there that you do enjoy, that if that was like 90% of it, you would be happy. I want you to look for that common thread, because you're going to see where we're going in this interview. And Stuart's common thread is your love and true fascination for humans, whoever they are. They could be someone you've never heard of to the president of the United States. You love it.
The owning your story and recognizing that you're the author of it, that you're the author of your own story. That's the incredible empowerment. And that how you frame your own story, that's what gives you power. Is there's no such thing as a loss. There's no such thing as a failure. Everything is a lesson. There's a buddy of mine who's made millions of dollars in business. And he used to complain to me because the landlord would not clean the ice out of the parking lot. And he said, somebody's going to fall and sue me and whatever. And I said, ever since he told me that, in all the years since, he would say, I'm having this problem with business, this problem with the bankers, with the lawyers, with the business partners who abandoned him. And I said, dude, it is all ice in the parking lot. It all goes in the book. It just all goes in the story. It's just your story's not over. After the divorce, after the really super sucky job, the terrible boss, the terrible ways the corporate owners, it all just is feeding your story. It's all just fueling you forward into the next thing. It's all just preparing you. All of the terrible, terrible people along the way, they're just going in the book. You may be able to name them or maybe not. They're all just going in your story.
When we're in it, it's beyond miserable. And I know you've been in it and you're very open about talking about it. So how did we go from your drunk waiter slinging like potato skins to...
How did you know?
I
with
love
the bacon bits.
I love a good potato skin, though, I gotta tell you.
With the cheese and the bacon bits.
So you're the drunk waiter. How do you go from there to now winning 10 Emmys, 3 Peabodys, decades of sobriety, and someone who sponsors other people and helps other people get sober now? What happened?
Well, there were a couple of paths. One is that I put one foot in front of the other. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other and just kind of bounced around the business. The sobriety thing was the great irony is you can succeed to a certain point and just be drunk all the time. And people get stuck in that sort of caricature of themselves. But at a certain point, it's like, oh my God, this is killing me. Like, this is either going to be the long, slow slog. But I mean, it's those, face it, functional alcoholics, functional drug addicts, that they can live to be 70, 80 years old. And it's just a miserable life, no matter how much money you have, because it's just a miserable way to live. And so it's a really long story you don't have time for, but I didn't discover until I was 10 years sober that my biological father drank himself to death at the age of 46. And he was a combat Marine and a lawyer. And so the DNA part of this, the heredity and the biological nature of things, that is for real. This whole substance use disorder, ever what the DSM calls it this time around, but this whole alcohol killing people been around for millennia. And we just keep learning new and different things about the various facets of it. But I have a brother that was an alcoholic. I have a sister who died at 57, alcoholic. And so I come by that thing, honestly. It's a health condition that has a significant mental health and spiritual component to it. And so I spent 10 years drunk and hungover and blacked out and on the air, and then had a couple of kids, had these beautiful little girls that I was ignoring. I was ignoring my marriage. Eventually it got to the point where I was like, I just guess I'm just going to die. And then I bumped into people who they modeled for me that they used to be every bit as bad as I was, only they added cocaine and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I was like, those guys can become transformed human beings. They modeled what it was like for me. They didn't lecture me. They didn't give me any advice or tips, or they didn't even do any interventions. They just modeled for me, it's possible to live a whole different, new, free life. And sure enough, I did. And then the Emmys and most of those awards, and 2 more kids and a marriage of almost 40 years, those came as the result of, those are the benefits, the ability to enjoy those kids, to have them pick up the phone when dad calls. There's not a call blocking on the other end. Those are the great benefits of sobriety, not just like money or jobs or titles or cars or houses. The great benefit is I can see the sunrise from the crow's nest here on the Redneck Riviera. That's the benefit of sobriety, not that I'm in a $5 million house a block from the beach. The great benefit is if I were in a pup tent, I can see the sunrise and I can appreciate a grouper sandwich, is that I appreciate it. I'm not throwing it up. That's a
great start.
Yes.
So in this news world, and not many people I always joke and say, I work with a lot of current newscasters and former newscasters who like want to get out, almost help me get out, because you can feel like you're stuck in that world. And I would love for the listeners to be able to have a real look of what is it like behind the scenes of a newsroom. And every newsroom, in some sense, every newsroom is different. In some sense, they're all the same. But it can look like from an outsider that it's glamorous, that you have your makeup's being done. Someone's bringing you a fresh press suit. They're bringing you exactly what you want for breakfast and lunch and kissing your ass. And you're getting free stuff all the time and doing ribbon cuttings, and you're in the parade and everyone loves you. Is that what it really is like?
First off, I never worked in a major market.
Don't put yourself down.
I worked in Charlotte, but I never worked in LA. I never worked.
But that's like top 10. Exactly. But you're still in the upper. You're still in an upper market, though.
The other thing, and I think this applies, it's not just for people who work in TV or radio or anything else. I know people who work in banking. And so let's say instead of earning $100,000 a year, they're earning $300,000 or $500,000 or even more than that, depending on what jobs they have. Because I know guys who work for Bank of America and they get to be 50, 55 years old, and they can't understand, what does the next thing look like? Who's going to hire me? And for those people, the answer is, for 30 plus years, and probably more like 40 if you include the jobs from my teens and 20s, I was a W-2 guy. I got a paycheck. And so what I notice on LinkedIn and everywhere else is everyone is like, okay, what kind of job do you want? Or how do we get you plugged into the next thing? But it's people like you, Tiffany, who said, no, the real way to liberation is for you to envision the job you want and the job you were born to do, and then create it for yourself. And that's the genius, is that for you to, is like the days of the W-2 employee. I mean, that to me is not the way to happiness, is to say, no, well, if I worked for 60 minutes, then I'd be happy. That's the great delusion.
It is the great delusion. I told myself that as well, but I know we want to know what happens inside a newsroom. What happens? Because you're the longtime local guy, and everyone listening in any country knows, like, the longtime local guy, the longtime familiar female face, whatever.
Well,
there's a lot of assumptions made.
I can give you details, but I can also tell you the bottom line for anyone. The details is that everyone, I don't care what their title is. I don't care if their title is anchor. I don't care if their title is network correspondent. I don't care if they're anchoring the evening news. They all work for someone other than themselves. I don't care if you're the chairman of the board. You're working for someone other than yourself. That's just the bottom line. So the great delusion is that, oh, you're the big investigative reporter. You get to pick your own stories. No, no, ma'am. No. Someone is telling you what to do. And so the longer you're in it and the more, desperate this industry becomes because it's imploding. Is what's happening.
That's a great word for it.
That's the dirty little secret is that local TV news in particular, but TV as a whole, learned nothing, zero from newsprint and thought that they were exceptional, and they are not exceptional. And so now the blogs, the podcasts, the Substack, if you follow any Substack, the equaling and the leveling of the playing field is kicking their ass because they cannot shift gears fast enough. They keep trying to be like the successful podcast. So they want to be, instead of being themselves, they want to be the next Joe Rogan. Well, there's one, and that's plenty. Okay. No disrespect. But I mean, we don't need another one. We don't need another Rush Limbaugh. You can't just go and repeat. Go and be you. There's nobody other than you. So go out and take your unique skill set and your unique experience and your passion and marry it to what the world needs. And then you can figure it the hell out how to monetize that. You can really figure it out. But you can't reverse engineer that thing. You can't forever be chasing the next Joe Rogan or whoever it is. Like, oh, okay, before Joe Rogan, it was others. Before they were running to Spotify, they were running to Sirius XM radio. And they had other names like Howard Stern. And so the media industry is forever chasing the person who does something unique. And it could be in a book, and it could be in a screenplay, and it could, because they're not, the whole corporate mindset is not terribly creative and innovative. Entrepreneurs are, because they have to be in order to survive. And so to become the category of one, and that's what you taught me, Tiffany Carter, is you said, and it made my hair on my arm stand up. You said, your whole life has prepared you for this. And that includes especially the failures, especially the getting the snot beat out of you, especially the, what is my purpose? Why am I even here? This is a failure. I can't believe I wasted my youth. I can't believe I gave 32 years to this industry and what I got was shown the door. Tiffany, I walked out of the lobby with a beefy slab of a security guy with his arms folded, past the National Headliner Awards and the Scripps Howard Award and the DuPont Columbia that they give in the same dome on Columbia University on New York City as they give the Pulitzer Prize. I had two of them. It was the equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize. They give it out at the same university, in the same dome, in the same kind of ceremony. I had two of them. Do you think that gave me job security at age 55? No. It actually worked against me because it meant my salary supporting a wife and 4 kids, thank you very much, was just north of $100,000 a year. And they said, and that's too much.
That's really what it came down to. That's the business of working for someone, for a corporation.
Amen.
Think about this, you guys. He beloved. This isn't like you had some scandal, right? This is a beloved TV personality, right?
I was not hitting on the interns. The interns were my daughter's ages.
Yeah, but some people don't care about that. They do it anyway.
I'm not one of them.
But well respected. It had nothing to do with any of that. It came down to, you're an employee and you're a number, and those numbers weren't adding up, and they could find a younger Stuart, a more hungry Stuart that was willing to take it up the ass for $50,000 a year and work 80 hours a week.
Yes. There was a joke in the industry. This is very telling. This will tell you everything you need to know about the industry. Is that a buddy of mine who also got laid off because he also had gray hair and he was also into six figures. They said, "Where did you used to work?" And he told them. And we had been taken over by the equivalent of Gannett, but they're all merging. And now that corporation is gone forever from the face of the earth because it's been bought out. And this guy who worked for a network said, "Oh, 24, 24, 24." And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, 24 years old, 24 hours a day, $24,000 a year. It was a joke. It was such a cliche. It was a joke. 24, 24, 24.
That happens not just in news. I know a lot of you have seen that happen where you work. Maybe you're not at a point where you've been there long enough to see that. And maybe it's not that for you, but we're programmed to think this is secure. I work for a network. I work like when I was in pharmaceuticals, right? I work for a well-established multi-trillion-dollar company and I make them money, like facts in print. I make them a lot of money. I'm award winning. And it's delusional to think I'm safe. Why? I'm not in control. How am I safe? And I had something similar happen, but not as many years put in, but it was something that had to happen, as this had to happen for you, Stuart, as it had to happen for you, listener, in some form of your life. Maybe you're dependent on your spouse for money and that son of a bitch left you suddenly. And now you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? That sucks. That had to happen to you. Maybe you had a nervous breakdown. Maybe you were in a career, you just couldn't do it anymore. Maybe you have a boss that was just horrible. Maybe it felt so icky and out of integrity to be doing what you were doing anymore. Maybe it's just slowly sucking your soul. All of it's miserable. All of it sucks. It's painful. And it all had to happen. And if I didn't have all these things leading up to when I finally said, fuck it. A lot of great things happen after fuck it, as long as I would say you're sober. If you're not sober, after fuck it is.
Yes.
But if you're sober, after fuck it, it's, you know what? Whatever your language is, fuck it, screw it. You know what? I'm doing it. But we don't make change unless we're in pain. And most of us have to be forced into a corner or backed into a wall, at least initially, to go, I got to wake up. So this happened suddenly where they released you, correct? It's not.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like they gave you a 2-week notice after 30 years.
Oh, no, absolutely not. No. And I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye.
You didn't give the...
They used to say, people would try to be nice and they would try to say, after you left the TV station, I said, no, wasn't left, was thrown out. They said, after you left, I said, no, fired. And they said, I was just trying to be nice. I said, don't be nice. I said, it's inaccurate. I said, here's how you know if someone's fired as opposed to laid off. I've been laid off. They give you a sheet cake. And they give you a party, and they say nice things about
and you typically get to say in that business, it's scripted, but it's been a wonderful many years with you. And interesting timing in interviewing you today. And I don't know if you saw it, but here in LA, major news. And like you said, now this is becoming a cliche of longtime people in companies. You guys just hear about it because it's TV personalities, right? But this is happening in every industry. KTLA fires now Mark Mester, who was the co-anchor to Lynette Romero, who after 24 years, kicked to the curb, no scandal, nothing. Her longtime co-anchor was taken aback that she didn't get to say goodbye and have given the dignity and respect that he went off script and didn't go on a rant, was still very, quote unquote, politically correct and did it for her. He got suspended within one day. This morning I opened up, fired, boom, bang, gone. 2 beloved long-term news desk anchors by No sheet cake, no nothing.
Yeah. And I think the big myth is that the one thing, because I was adopted as an infant, and so there's one word that is supercharged for me. And we won't go on the couch with the therapist, but there's one word that is supercharged for me, and that word is family. And on behalf of real families everywhere, the next corporation that calls us a family and then fires me, I'm going to sue them. And I did sue them. But please, on behalf of real families everywhere, families of choice and families of biology, dear corporate America, give us back that word. You are not a family. We are not, and not in all caps, in the biggest font you can put. We are not a family. I have family. I have kids. I have a woman that I adore. She's the most important person in this universe to me for this life. I have a biological mother. I had a mom and dad. They're family. You, W whoever, or KCAL or KTLA, you, I don't care who you are, CBS 60 Minutes, I don't care who you are not my family. We have a business arrangement. We may like each other, we may be friends, but we are not family. Give us back that human word, because what we have is not a relationship. We have a transaction. And the best business in the world is where, Tiffany, whether I pay you or we go our separate ways, we have a relationship which transcends a transaction. Like
Correct.
This afternoon, I'm not paying you, Tiffany, and you're not paying me.
Yep.
I think it's in our mutual benefit that we have this relationship, but our business relationship for right now is over with. I'm not paying you, you're not paying me. We have a relationship because we respect each other as people. If you don't even allow someone to say goodbye, what kind of family is that? There's not even a divorce that happens that way, where you can't talk to the kids anymore. You can't talk to the ex-mother-in-law anymore. That's not a family. That's the dissolution of a family.
And we have to own our part too. I'm not saying, right, these corporations, these companies, there's the manipulative aspect of we're a family. Even the word team gives me a bit of a rash, if I'm being honest. Okay. So there's manipulative stuff in there, but we're responsible for deprogramming ourselves.
Yes.
And that's why I like having these conversations, and I can go on a major rant about it. We've got to deprogram ourselves and go, oh my God, that's right. This is a transaction. They're not obligated just because I've given you X many years of time, just because I'm an amazing employee. They're not obligated to give you shit. And now you're obligated to fulfill your contract if you don't want to be sued, you don't want to be fired, or you want to check, right? So you have to adhere to that. They have to do certain things so that they don't get sued. But that's about it. The only way that you can really take your power back is, like what Stuart said earlier, is use those talents, those gifts, those things that you love, pair them with what you can see that there's people like need that or want that or could use that in the world, and do your own thing. Otherwise, if you want to stay working for someone else, that's okay, but just be aware of what it is.
There's this concept, I think it's called Ikigai, Ikigai. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's the Venn diagram. It's where you draw the ovals and you see where they overlap. And the four ovals are, what do I love? What am I passionate about? I really love doing it. I would do it for free. I have done it for free. What am I good at? I have a lot of experience, and people will say, you know what you're good at? And then they'll tell you what you're good at. And then you love and you're good at something. And then what does the world need? Like, people really need that skill. And then if you can answer those three, you'll be able to figure out the fourth, which is, what will people pay me a lot of money to do? And it took me years before I realized I had talked to more than 7,000 people on camera. I had done it for almost 40 years. And people said, you make me relaxed. I forget that the camera is there. You really have, you said, you have the new age thing, Tiffany. You have a grounding energy.
I'm glad. Wow. I'm glad I'm new age. I'll take it.
Grounding energy. But some people just say, you're just easy to talk to. It's easy for me to talk to you. That, my friends, some people don't put you at ease when you're on camera. You feel, and we're back with Tiffany. And Tiffany, we're live and on the air. And no, don't be a poser. Don't be Mr. Newscaster Stu. Just be yourself, and people enjoy that. And then the result is that people become themselves on camera. They have that clear light that flows through them. They're not being anything different. They're not playing a role. They're telling you the same thing when the red light comes on and the camera's on that they would tell you if there was no camera. If you were in the middle of the desert and there wasn't a camera around. And all of a sudden I realized that's a skill. That's a skill set that people will pay you to do, is to elicit the sound. To elicit the sound of someone's unique, in all the history of the universe, their unique voice, and to capture it to where their great, 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 great grandchildren can hear it. And all of a sudden it was magical. It was really magical to be able to find that I love doing it. My wife has to tear me away from the convenience store clerk. She's like, come on, we have to get back on the road.
I can only imagine.
I won't talk to anyone. I love talking to people at the bus stop. But to be able to do that, to be able to love it, to be able to make them the center of attention, to let them be heard, there's no greater human need. I mean, it's just right up there with air and water, to be heard, to be seen, the need to actually be treated with basic respect. There's just this crying need for that, not for some kind of poser, have your makeup on with your makeup off, with your hair a mess, just to be seen.
As he's looking at me right now.
No, I don't think. That's no makeup.
I've coached Stuart in my robe. I mean, what do you want? I mean, do you really want me to come in a suit? No. So
you're the one who told me that people appreciate that.
Right. And that's why Stuart does videos now, getting his hair cut. That's what, we don't need, right? This is what people want to see, is the real person. So what got you from the shock of losing this multi-decade career and then parlaying your passions and your gifts into this incredible company you started called Voice Locket?
Well, Voice Locket came after a whole series of, I've been told not to call them failure, because I produced a book. I produced a podcast, which now has 140 plus episodes. I shot a documentary film with my mother, my birth mother, and my sister, and my brother, and my sister, and my mother, and my aunt and uncle. They're all gone from this planet now. In terms of what you're saying, Tiffany, when we ask the universe, am I headed in the right direction? Give me a sign. What we usually mean is, tell me what that I've planned to do is the right thing. Like, reward me for this book. Give me millions of dollars for this podcast. This was my idea. And a friend of mine who's very spiritual said, you got to love a hard no from the universe. You got to learn to love a hard no, because it steers you toward the yes. So you got to love every red light, every flat tire, every cancer diagnosis. You got to love every divorce, every breakup. You got to love the hard no's, because I had no, 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 until I hit yeah. It's the old line, who was it? Winston Churchill. The ability to stumble from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Okay, we know where all the red lights are. Where's the green light? We know if we're the little rat pursuing the cheese, we know where all the dead ends in the maze were. That just means we've eliminated, we've put red X's, we've spray painted red X's on all those other pathways. So that just means we haven't hit the green pathway yet. And it's coming. It's coming. You just got to have faith. It's coming. We've eliminated that. Just the only wasted time is the time I go down the same dead end.
And keep trying to make it work, trying to make it work.
Yes, and it's just not.
So with Voice Locket, what gave you the indicator? Because you're a multi-passionate. Most of my listeners are. That's who I attract. I attract all of you dreamers, visionaries who are all over the place. And I corral all of your stuff into how we're going to package and focus on just narrow it down and make a shit ton of money at this one thing. And then you can do whatever the hell you want with other passions after that. What gave you that indicator? Was it a feeling? Was it the response of people that Voice Locket, this is it?
I signed up customers. People started paying me. And then I spent a year, 14 months actually, in which they paid me $1,000 each. And I spent about $3,000 for each one. That's the kind of businessman I am. That's the kind of razor sharp businessman who inherited Tiffany. And Tiffany said, raise your prices 5-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold. You need to be charging 10,000, 25. And so then just under your tutelage, I got a $12,000 customer and a $25,000 customer, and we're off. And this is not years ago. This is months ago. So it's like, and we're off. And I have a trademark pending on VoiceLock. I have a trademark pending on our wonderful, wonderful slogan, which I had a really good marketing person come up with. She turned it into a question. Whose voice do you want to save? Who is the voice that if all of a sudden they disappeared from this earth, had a stroke, dementia, whose voice would you miss? Who's the voice that you would go, oh my God, I've got to find that voicemail. I've got to find that voicemail that mom left or grandma left me. I've got to find that VHS tape from the 90s. I'm staying here at the beach with a woman who, she said, yeah, I had this long interview with my mom, and then Hurricane Katrina came. And now the technology is such that it's not one tape.
Right. It's in the cloud now, whatever the fuck that means, but it's in the cloud.
So now it's also on your brother's hard drive. And so that redundancy is a game changer, because it means all of a sudden the great, great, great grandchildren in the future will know what you sounded like. And they don't just want to see your goofy TikTok. They want to hear you telling your real story. And guess who elicits real stories?
Who's the best at not just getting people to open up and share, where it's not like they're being a PR version of themselves? Yes. The real stuff. And you only do that when you feel safe and comfortable with someone. But then from there, you have to package something into a story, which yes. All of his thousands and thousands of interviews and all of that training is what set him up for that. All of his awards give him the clout, right? That you guys listening, you may probably have never heard of Stuart Watson. And you're like, okay, this guy obviously knows what he's doing. This guy's won 10 Emmys. He's got the clout, right? He's on this show. I don't have anyone on here who's basic. So we already know he's got that. And then you can lean in further. I really am excited because we developed together. There's two types of clients that you serve with Voice Locket. And I want you guys to listen carefully because some of you get really torn with your business because you're like, there's this ideal client, but then there's also this other person I want to serve. You can still serve more than one type of person as long as there's a marrying, as long as it makes sense. So would you share like the two main ideal clients for Voice Locket?
And you and I spent hours working on this. And I really appreciate you. And I thank you. I'm grateful for you, Tiffany, because you helped me to do this. And people for years, marketers for years, said, who's your avatar? I had no idea what they were talking about. And then I realized I have a bunch of buddies who are in their, let's say, 40s and 50s. So their parents are healthy, right? And they have their memories. And these guys have made some money. And so they don't mind spending thousands of dollars to preserve their grandma. The first guy that I ever did this with, his grandmother was 100. She died at 102. And we spent hours talking to her on video, her telling stories. And so that was one client, is the person in their 40s or 50s who they would spend money on a ghost-written memoir. They would spend money on a $25,000 oil painting because it preserved that person. What this does is preserve them on film.
Their mannerisms, not just their voice, but their mannerisms.
The laughter.
I love that. The laughter, the inflection in their voice, even their like little nervous isms that we all do. Yes. And the stories that people will tell you as a third party trusted interviewer versus their own family is very different.
It's like catnip to me when people say again and again and again, I've never heard that story. I've known this woman for 53 years since I was a little boy, and I've never heard her tell that story. And now it's captured for their great-grandchildren. The second one is sometimes in their lives, and I know what this is, my kids don't care about my stories. My kids run the ages of 25 to 37. They don't care about my stories.
Right now, they don't care. True.
Until and unless I passed. So my second big client are the people who are in their 60s or their 70s or even their 80s. And they're like, my kids don't care. I'm like, yeah, maybe not. And they may never care. But you know what? Their grandkids are going to want to know what you sounded like, especially when you laugh exactly like they did. Because the more we know, this is science, the more we know, personality follows genetics. So people I never met because I was put up for adoption, my mother would say, you look like your father, or you hold your head like your father. And that was not a compliment, Tiffany. She did not like my father. He was a drunk who let her down. But it was so weird to have my life, how verbose I am, or how I have just a little bit of enough charm to have people keep me around. Those things came from my drunken father, my drunken ex-Marine combat veteran who drank himself to death. And so there were some good things about him. And so it's important to preserve that. I just can't, most people will never use me to do this. There's just not enough time and whatever. But just to have it captured on professional film, it's the equivalent of having the portrait photography or the oil portrait or the memoir or the handwritten letters. Now we have the technology not only to capture it in rich and crystal clear audio and film, we have the capacity to preserve it. So it's not lost in a box in the attic or floating in the flooded basement. It's preserved.
And
for
these
all
are
time.
things that I think that people would also play at funerals, as in ceremonies,
Gatherings, family reunions.
For many generations to come. And I want to wrap up with something that happened as we're coaching. Stuart got approached, and this is why with business, it's fluid. You've got to go for the damn thing, and people will start offering you money for things. That doesn't mean you have to take it, but you've got to take a hard look at it because there might be something there that you never thought of. And he started getting approached with this same kind of demographic, except they own businesses or they've started nonprofits.
Yes.
And they, like you guys, a business owner, myself, and they wanted to share the story of how this foundation got built, how this recovery center got built, how this family business, the story of the family business, the story. And there's a whole story there just on the shop that would enhance the brand of the shop. So it can be used as like a marketing video, which is great, which is what, let me tell you, that's what you want right now. But it can also twofold be used for her grandchildren and her great grandchildren. Look what they had, the sandwich shop that's long gone now, or even if it's not long gone, it got passed down. Now you have video captured of what it was like decades prior. So cool.
The story of Apple is not a story of Apple. It's a story of a guy named Steve Jobs. It's a story about a human being. That's what we relate to, is stories of people. So these multi-generational businesses and these founder stories, that can be our legacy, that we owned everything from the sandwich shop to the multi-generational business worth billions of dollars that grew out of. And so this is not, the personality of the person is infused into the business. Bill Gates' quirky little personality is baked into this huge thing called Microsoft. There are these professors, these math nerds who form this thing called Google. Thank God there was no marketing focus group on that. What the heck is that? And all of a sudden it takes over the world.
You guys see all of those years of experience, all the pain that happened. He might have not left that news station ever. He might have retired there and got the damn sheet cake and never started Voice Locket, which is what he was meant to do all along, and impact and change, make a shit ton of money doing it. But the impact on many generations long after your past of you helping these families preserve those memories of loved ones who are dying, who are sick, who are aging, even the founder stories of amazing companies. That's part of your legacy. It all led you here. And I just want you guys to really think about that. And some of you might be tripping right now. I don't know, Stuart and Tiffany. I have no idea. I don't think I'm especially talented in anything. And I really love baking. And people say I'm really great at giving advice on relationships. I don't know if someone's going to pay me for that. And now they're all stuck in their head about it. What would you say to them on that?
Don't ever devalue yourself like that. It's the line, who are you not to be brilliant? No one else is going to step up and do what you do. You have a unique skill set. And it's almost like it's incumbent upon us to figure that out. And if you have a good enough, do this kind of thing, do the hard things, the dead ends, not to be attracted by the bright, shiny objects, but to do the hard work of focusing on the one thing, to thread the needle. Tiffany, how I wanted to fly off in a million directions and do other things. And you're like, okay, let's put that aside. Okay, back to the main thing. Let's keep doing the main thing.
I love my multi-passionates. You guys are wild.
As we say in recovery, the main thing is to keep the main thing.
There you go.
As long as you keep the main thing, then, people are like, I don't have money. I don't have money for that. You come up with the idea. And I got rid of my client board. I took a picture of it and wrote it down, and I erased my whiteboard and I wrote down cash equals proof of concept. So you get some people paying you to do that, and people are going to want to throw money at you. So if you get the buckets in the right order, make sure they're big enough because the cash is coming.
And this is coming from someone, you guys, who we worked through and still work through lots of money noise, money wounding,
unworthiness,
all of it. And he's saying this with true, deep compassion and true, deep conviction, which is really almost a miracle. I've got to say.
Oh, it is a miracle.
I want you guys to check out Voice Lock It so you can follow the rest of the story. So you can swipe up. The link is in show notes, but it's voicelockit.com. Also, if you are sitting there stuck and spinning, don't sit in that spot. Reach out, see how you can work with me. I've put some options for you also in the show notes. You don't know where to go next. You don't have to do it alone. And maybe you keep trying to figure it out on your own is also your way of subconsciously self-sabotaging yourself. We're all made to do something great, and we're all equally as worthy of getting highly, highly paid for our gifts, no matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is, or your talent. Stuart, I adore you. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, your heart, your charm, all the things.
Tiffany, I adore you. Thank you for all your tutoring. Thank you for the pats on the back and the kicks in the ass.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.